the irony of quarterback rankings being so interesting is that one of the reasons that they inspire so much debate and discussion at this moment in time is because it is Mahomes and everybody else. It is because that it is not clear after Mahomes how everybody else should be sorted out. I have my own opinions on which guys tend to get overrated, but everybody's got their opinions. And we're, as I talked about with Warren Sharp, just I think in a period of time with quarterbacks where scoring has gone down. You wrote about how running is now reaching a parity with passing, which I did not know, but that wasn't the case for a while. But the passing attack is perhaps not doing some of what we've been used to, and we don't know how to process this. We don't totally know how to process the output not being what we're used to. So I think that we're almost, as a people, as a culture, a little disappointed with our quarterbacks overall and not sure how to process and sort all of that out.
And one thing that was indicative of that for me was that I think it was ESPN did a poll of a bunch of players this week where they asked, most best, but also most overrated and underrated. And Josh Allen got votes for both most underrated and overrated. And Tua, of course, was kind of in that. I don't think he got a lot of underrated votes, but certainly was in that overrated conversation. And yet, Tua has been one of the most productive passers of the past handful of years, and he's one of those guys. Purdy is in that same group, and maybe it's just sort of that coaching tree lends itself to that. But this idea of he's just a system quarterback, and we can plug guys into that particular like Shanahan coaching tree system, and anybody can put up numbers in that system. And I think that's really unfair. And I think we talked about this last time I was on the podcast, but also it just speaks to like, we're so unsure about quarterbacks that they can be hyper productive, but also overrated. They can be both underrated and overrated. You've got Mahomes gobbling up, and before him, Brady gobbling up all these Super Bowls. So I think one of the reasons why you would say Allen was overrated was like, okay, he's lost to Kansas City in the playoffs multiple times. He hasn't won a Super Bowl yet for all the wins that Buffalo has had during the regular season. And when that's your only metric, I guess it is kind of disappointing that the Bills haven't won a Super Bowl yet with him at quarterback. But at the same time, you look at it and you're like, where were the Bills before Josh Allen? Where, he is a guy that is almost now viewed as like the prototype for the modern NFL quarterback with his arm and his ability to run and throw and all these things. And I think one of the reasons you mentioned why running was had kind of gained on passing in terms of expected points added is quarterback runs are part of that now. There are a lot more. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, a bunch of guys can do that. That's a really effective play that was not in a lot of playbooks, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and he's almost like the Ohtani Josh Allen is, where he can pass and he's got a crazy arm and he's also just this bulldozing running back. And with him, I will believe the stats. That's my thing with quarterbacks. I will believe the data that you produce. I've got my issues with him. I think he makes some bad decisions, but
he can make terrible decisions. If you pulled up like the 10 worst Josh Allen plays, he might have the worst crop of plays of any quarterback if you did that for every quarterback.
Yeah, he's certainly a massive floor raiser, though. As far as the system stuff, with Tua, I can understand it just on the basis of talent because the receivers are so fast, and Tyreek Hill, though we don't really use Hill's presence with Mahomes as a detriment to him. It's all very arbitrary.
Yeah, that's very funny how that works.
The whole system thing is strange to me because when you press somebody on that, there's nothing behind it most times. You go, okay, well, what's the system? Like, what is the magical system that makes guys wide open? And there's just nothing really there. And if you watch enough of these videos, JT at the QB school, and he's got a ton of opinions on what happens out there or what should happen out there, but you see enough of that Madden view, and what you discover is that, there are certain plays that are better than other plays, and there are certain designs that are sometimes better than other designs, but you're really just watching a very high-level game of rock, paper, scissors. And sometimes the quarterback drops back there, and everybody's covered. And sometimes he drops back there and one or two guys are open. And it's just sort of like that. It can happen a little bit more so in some cases and a little bit less so in other cases. But one of the reasons why I tend to trust the output of the quarterback is that I view NFL teams a little bit like the efficient market hypothesis, where there's going to be something, these players and how they produce, whatever situation they're in, there's going to be something wrong and there's going to be something right about the situation. And I don't trust people to be able to incorporate all of it. So I'd rather just believe their product that they produce. If we talk about Purdy, obviously great running back. If I do want to identify a system for Shanahan in a way that's actually specific, I would say that they have great running games and they build on the basis of that. That would be the system as I see it. Great running back, great tight end. We'll see about Ayuk. I don't know, but Ayuk was a very good receiver. Debo is a very good Debo. I don't know how to explain it.
He's his own position.
He can't run a slant route. So I actually would say he's one of the more overrated players, but that's a whole other conversation. But the offensive line is really bad. It's really bad. McKivitz gets just destroyed all the time. Williams is great, but everything else is sketchy. I have no idea how to weigh the difficulty or ease of your position players being really good, but your offensive line mostly being really bad. And I don't know if anybody else knows how to do it. I know that we tend to care more about those position players and they're more famous, but I don't think anybody is able to. And in any situation that these guys are in, I think you could argue that Herbert was maybe uniquely saddled. I know many people make that argument, but there's going to be, you're going to have great talent here, but not great talent there. And maybe you have bad coaching here, but you've got a bad head coach, but a great offensive coordinator or whatever. There's always something wrong. There's always something right. There are a million injuries happening. And ironically and paradoxically, all of that variance, I think, because it's just varied all over the place, makes the product more trustworthy and stable. And quarterback play is, I think, a little more stable than what some people would have you believe based on how these discussions go.
Yeah, I think that's right statistically. And I think that that's an argument for, like we were talking about earlier, that like sacks are a quarterback stat. There's limits to this. You can build a horrendous offensive line that just your quarterback is getting hit on every play and it's really not his fault. And there is also that element to nowadays, like one of the knocks on Tua is he can't do anything when the play breaks down and everyone is covered. And that's what separates him from a Mahomes or even like a Josh Allen, is that ability to, okay, all your reads are covered, make something happen. And that might be a lot of people's definition of a system quarterback. But at the same time, the offensive line is so vital to the running game, more than anything else. And then the running game is actually what dictates some of your success in the passing game as well, because you can kind of get, the box to people to bring down guys into the box. You go over the top, or, hey, can they just sit back there in that like too high shell and you can't really get guys open off of that because they don't respect your running game. All of this is what makes the NFL really great. Also, that's, I think, the big takeaway from that is it doesn't lend itself to the type of analysis that we get from baseball or even basketball, where things are more compartmentalized to the player just owns his own performance. And it's not easy to project future performances from teams because there is variance. There are fit considerations and all that, especially in basketball. But it's nowhere near the same way that it is in football, where we're all just kind of flying blind. There have been studies in the past that show, I think it was Brian Burke before he went to ESPN, he had a provocative headline story, but I think it was right, called Preseason Projections Are Worthless in the NFL, which is that you could, if you just picked every team, this was in the 16 game era, if you picked every team to finish 8-8, you do just about as good a job as some of the, like every statistical method that has like every bell and whistle and all the fancy elements to it and all of that. I don't know if that's changed, and I would bet Vegas maybe does a little bit better relative to 8-8, but probably not that much better. And I think that tells you, I guess it would be 8.5 and 8.5 now, or 8, 8, and 1. We'll do that. But so I do think that that's also a residue of this situation where so many different parts have to be right and wrong, and you're dealing with injuries and the fit and all that. It's what's awesome about this sport. I think that's an underrated component of why it is so popular.